Hi, everyone. Okay, I think some people might still be coming in. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just give a brief intro to our presenter and go ahead and fill out that poll that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. So we have a great presentation today from Guy Zegel. He is currently leading Thomas Reuters' first enterprise design system. He will impart some great wisdom from today, from his 15 plus years of design leadership experience and in this session, Making the Leap. So now before we start, I just want to remind everyone there's going to be a few polls. Make sure you engage, and then go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A, and Guy will get a chance to answer those after his presentation. So with that, give him a warm welcome, and go ahead and keep filling out that poll.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction, Catherine. And hi, everyone. Just give you a few more seconds to finish filling out the poll, and then we'll get started. How's the poll looking, Catherine?
Looks like we have about 76 votes. Are you able to see it on the main stage?
I can see the poll. I can't see the votes, though.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I can go ahead and close it if you're ready to get started.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Interesting. That's awesome. We have a nice mix of people. Okay, I think we can get started.
Okay.
Awesome. So, hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this session. I'm really excited to talk about challenges facing first-time managers and share some of the mindsets, approaches, and tools that I've been using to make my life as a manager a bit more, no pun intended, manageable. This is the kind of talk I would have loved to go back in time and show my past self, because I know I definitely needed one of these. So I see we saw from the poll that we have a nice mix of people who are new to management, have been in management for a while, are thinking about going into management. I'm sure that everyone, or I do hope that everyone gets something out of this session. I know I keep, getting better and improving as a manager every day. So, who am I? I've been working in tech for a while, across a lot of different industries and types of companies. And for the past year and 8 months, I've been a director of design system at Thomson Reuters. I lead a team of designers, engineers, accessibility specialists, content designers, product managers, UX researchers, and we're all working together to build the first company-wide one design system to rule them all. But how did I get here? So I actually started as a software developer, and I did that for about 10 years. And one day I discovered design and UX, and I really fell in love with it. And I was really, really lucky to make that move into design. And then a few years into my design career came that big moment. I became a manager. Um, I became a manager the same way many other people become managers, through inertia. I was doing a really good job as a designer, and then one day my boss calls me to his office and says, "You're being promoted to a manager, and you're going to have direct reports." And I was super excited. I made it. I finally made it. But now that I had a new problem, like a lot of many other people who become managers, being told that I'm now a manager was basically the entire management training I received. Before we continue, no design talk is ever complete without a disclaimer. Everything I'm going to talk about is based on my own personal, specific journey into management. I hope that my story and advice resonate with you, but there's no one right way to manage people. Every team, every organization has their own unique challenges. I really encourage you all to find out what works for your personal style within your situation. So, what did I do in my situation? I realized I needed to do some independent learning, meaning I had to go and read some books about how to be a manager. So, if you go to Amazon and search for people management books, you get over 9,000 results. Even if you want to narrow it down to first time manager, you still get quite a few books. And if you want to turn to podcasts, because those are gaining a lot of traction, there are currently more than 100 podcasts about management. And that number just keeps growing and growing. So, my main takeaway from this was that there are way too many resources for managers. And what's even worse is that some of those resources contradict each other. So, remember my disclaimer from earlier that there's no one true way to manage people? That is true. Otherwise, there would be one book and one podcast, and everyone's lives would be much easier. So, as I was reading those books and trying to figure out how to be a manager, another conclusion I was quickly getting to was the skills that brought you here are not the skills that will make you successful. Why is that? Well, up until now, moving from junior to intermediate to senior was all about getting better at your craft, solving bigger user problems, telling a better, more compelling story when you present those solutions. You advance by increasing the scope and size of what you're responsible for. And I'm not saying that as a manager, you no longer need to understand the craft or know how to present your ideas, but it's no longer more of the same as you advance. It's a completely new mindset that requires a new set of skills. Put it a bit differently, it's time to evolve. And there are a few things that cause that need for evolution. The first thing is one of the hardest things to reconcile as a manager is how much you have to let go. If you don't, what you're really saying is, I'm the only person in the world who can do this, and I'm the best. And that's really absurd. So you can no longer be in the weeds and make those deep dives as you did before. You can't be everywhere. Another aspect is you need to adopt a new state of flow. Flow is that optimal state when you're completely involved in an activity for its own sake. So, as a manager, that state of flow is way less common, if completely non existent at times. You're not diving deep on a task during an uninterrupted block of time, something that is really required in the state of flow. You're the one helping others dive deep on tasks. You're also not receiving that immediate feedback on what you're doing. You might not find out until months later if a decision you made or a conversation you had with someone had a positive or negative effect on your team. You need to find different ways to reach your own personal state of flow as a manager. Your primary job as a manager is to share, to explain, to reinforce, to ask questions, to share again, to explain more, and ask more questions over and over and over again, all the time. People can't read your mind, and they really don't have to. The best managers bear that burden of making what's implicit, what's unspoken, explicit. So the team that you're managing can really function well. This one is a big one. Everyone you're managing will bring a different natural work style to the office, which means they all have different things that are going to inspire and motivate them or hold them back from doing their best work. Sometimes you get lucky and you have people on your team who have very similar working style to yours, and you gel immediately. There's no fuss. You're all working as one. But more often, the opposite is true. And you end up with employees that just approach work differently. You must keep in mind that different, in this case, is not necessarily bad or wrong. Each work style has its own set of strengths and challenges, and no work style is fundamentally better or worse than any other one. In an ideal world, we would all understand the work styles of our colleagues and proactively adapt to meet somewhere in the middle. Unfortunately, most of the time, someone needs to make that first step. And as a manager, that's your job. You're the one in power. And if your goal is to support your team in performing at their highest level, you have to work to understand their needs and adapt your work style to theirs. You have to remember that when they are successful, when your team is successful, that means you're successful. I'm going to mention a couple of tools later that will help you with understanding your people's work style. This is really tough for me as a people pleaser. I love saying yes. I love being that hero that solves problem and swoops in and saves the day. But as a manager, you have to protect yourself and your team. You cannot avoid conflict. You won't have everyone liking you, and you shouldn't really try. And last here, you'll have to manage and really prioritize your time and your team's time ruthlessly so you can conserve time and energy. Now, I'd love to get your input. Catherine is going to throw up a poll, and I'd love you to pick the one thing out of all these 6 changes that I mentioned that you're most concerned or worried about. Okay, let's take a look at the results. Interesting. So, being a lot of people pleasers here, I know it's very, very common with designers. Losing that hands-on control is definitely something that is concerning, especially to people who put a lot of um, associate craft with what they're most strong at, or that's their forte. Um, and I see a lot of people are also, adapting to other people's styles. That's also a thing that's, we're not naturally, um, trained to do. So let's keep going and see how hopefully I can help with some of those things. So, another thing I realized as time went by was that I was really, really excited about people management. It's something I love doing, and at the same time, understanding that it can be very overwhelming. So, let's try and demystify management and see if we can create some order in that chaos. And we'll start from square one. What does it mean to be a manager? What does a manager actually do? What is the essence of management? In the excellent book, The Effective Manager, Mark Horstman describes a manager as someone who gets results and keeps their people. Julie Juo, in The Making of a Manager, defines it as someone who needs to get better outcomes from a group of people working together. There are two main aspects then to being a manager. You need to ensure the delivery of outcomes and at the same time enable the environment that delivers those outcomes. Taking that definition of management and breaking it down, I see four themes that emerge. First, you're going to need to define a vision. Where are we heading? What does it look like? How do we get there? And then you need to make sure your team understands that vision and gets on board. Second, you need to provide feedback. That feedback will help your team know if they're on the right track towards that vision that you described earlier. Third, there's a lot of communication involved in being a manager. On top of what I already mentioned around vision and feedback that you communicate downwards to your reports, you also need to communicate sideways and build relations with your peers. Those are the teams that will help your team achieve your goals. And you also need to communicate upwards to your manager and their peers to make sure you understand what their vision is and report how your team is contributing to that. You'll need a lot of patience because you're going to be repeating yourself over and over. You're going to repeat yourself over and over because, from a math perspective, you're interacting with way more people. And the more people you interact with, the more you need to communicate. It just multiplies. And last, but definitely not least, you're going to need to make sure your team keeps developing and reaching their own personal development goals. Remember the keeps their people aspect from the previous slide? That's how you do it. So only four simple themes, right? I'm already overwhelmed. So let's narrow it down to 6 skills that I think are a must for every manager to get better at. So those are the 6 skills. And again, there's way more things you can do and should do as a manager, but concentrating on these 6 skills are going to make your life as a manager and the outcome of your management much better. The first is a big one, and one that many first-time managers really struggle with. I've seen some long-time managers that actually struggle with this as well. How do you avoid micromanaging your team? This is where you need to reframe that control you used to have over the deliverables and how you do things. And instead, you need to describe the outcome that you're looking for. Don't tell people how to do their job. Tell them what the end goal looks like. That's that describing a vision, describing an outcome. And let them figure out how to get there. You're still going to get the outcome you're looking for, assuming you did a good job of describing what you're looking for. But you give them the autonomy to explore how they get there and be the owners of that solution. And that's pretty awesome because a lot of times you're going to get the outcome you were looking for with a better solution that you were even considering, right? Because they have different experience. They might be better at different things than you are. And giving them that freedom to try how to get to that same outcome is going to develop them better. The second one is providing feedback. And that's especially behavior feedback. It's a really, really easy thing to do that almost no one does or knows how to do well. Later on in the talk, I'm going to describe a very simple method of giving feedback. And that is how you encourage a specific behavior, whether it's a positive or avoiding a negative one. And if you do it right, you eliminate that personal aspect from the feedback, the one that feels like someone is being attacked. So, knowing how to provide feedback and encourage a certain behavior you want to see in your team is an amazing tool. Seeing your team as a group of individuals is really important. In addition to knowing how to work and communicate with them, it's also going to make them feel seen, that you care about them, and hopefully you really do care about your team. Each person on your team has their own way they prefer to communicate, to receive feedback, and receive praise, to handle difficult situations, just like you do. So, again, I'm going to introduce a very simple tool of how to help you learn what your team's work style is. Learning your team members' individual work style is just one aspect of creating that psychological safety, an environment of trust that allows them to try things and do their best work without fear of failure. The best tool in your disposal to build that trust with your team is regular one on ones. There are different approaches to what goes into a one on one, but I personally prefer my one on ones to not be about work updates. I have other mechanisms in place to know what my team is working on. I don't want to waste more time trying to get updates and reports from them. Instead, the one on ones I have with my team are perfect opportunities to connect with them as humans, to listen to their achievements and challenges, and really support their development. And this is where coaching comes into play. As their manager, you're there to support their growth. You understand what the next level looks like, and you should work with them on getting there. Coach them to close the gaps between where they're now and where they want to get to. And the last one, number 6, is a big one. That's the one I'm still struggling with the most. Um, to be honest, I'm learning how to get better in all those 6 skills, but this one personally is my worst. You can't do everything on your own. Remember, we talked about ruthless time management. You're going to have to delegate tasks to your team. And there are 2 reasons. One of the first one, once you became a manager, there are new tasks you're going to need to do, especially ones that your manager delegates down to you. And the second reason, growing your team means they'll have to be challenged. They'll have to be pushed and stretched to get to that next level. And delegation is an amazing way to do it. So I want to introduce 3 tools that I found extremely helpful. The first is the feedback framework that I mentioned. The second one is the work preference questionnaire. And the third is the ladder of leadership. Before we get into those, actually, Catherine has a third poll for you. And I'd love to get an indication from you from those 6 skills that I mentioned. Which one do you personally struggle with the most? And then we're going to jump into those 3 tools. Yeah, so go ahead and fill out the poll. Okay, let's take a look at the poll. Ooh, Setting a direction and delegating definitely get the most votes. Yeah, those are the two that I personally, I think, um, had the most to learn how to do well or how to do better. So let's go into those three tools they're quite simple, but they're very powerful. So the first one is the feedback framework. It's a really simple framework. It's a very common one. I didn't invent it at all. I've been using it at work, but also in my personal life because it's not specifically about work. It's about a behavior of another person. And as simple as it is, it's just as powerful. And it has 4 steps. The first step, you start by asking for permission to give that feedback. Hey, can I give you some feedback? And this is a really important step because you want to ensure that the other person is in a state of mind that's ready to get that feedback. They might be angry, they might be busy, they might be thinking about something else. And if you give them the feedback at that moment, they're not going to be receptive. But assuming they say yes, you move on to the second step. Describe the observed behavior when you. And this is really important. We're not giving feedback to someone about our interpretation or assumption. So let's say someone is consistently late to come into meetings or they come in unprepared to a meeting. A bad way to give that feedback to that person would be, I see you really don't care about work. But that's not an observed behavior. The observed behavior was they were late or they were not prepared. Once you give feedback about the observed behavior, you eliminate the other person saying, no, I'm not. Because you can argue about interpretation, but you cannot argue about something that actually happened. And then after you describe an observed behavior, you say what the impact is. Here's what happens. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's say when you come to the meeting late and unprepared, that's the observed behavior. The team looks unprofessional and we lose credibility in front of the client. That's the impact. Or when you share insights with product managers, that's the observed behavior. You get them excited and on board and raise the maturity of the organization. That's the impact. So you describe a behavior. What is the impact of that? And you cap it all up with encouraging future behavior, which is if the behavior is something you want to see more of, you say, please keep it up. If it's something you want to change, could you do it differently? Could you change that? And when you have a bit more rapport and trust between the two of you, you can involve the other person and say, how would you do it differently next time? What would you do about it? So these 4 simple steps, asking for permission, describing an observed behavior, stating the impact, and encouraging future behavior is an amazing, simple framework that eliminates the feeling of personal attack, because you're not assuming anything about why that person is doing that. You're just saying you did something, there was an impact, whether you intended to or not. Know that I'd like you to do more of that, or please don't do it. So that's the feedback framework and a powerful tool. The work preference questionnaire is a list of questions, surprising, and to help you understand someone's personal work style. These are some of the questions that I've been using, but feel free to add any that are relevant to your team. You know them best after all, or you will once once they answer these questions. I took a lot of these from the Know Your Team website. It's a wonderful website with a lot of resources and articles about management. Highly recommended. And there are a lot of different questions here, from where are you on the spectrum of introvert to extrovert? What are your pet peeves at work? How do you like getting feedback? And where do you like getting feedback? How do you like being praised? What takes you really, what is really easy for you to learn versus what takes you a bit longer compared to others to get a handle on. Very, very simple. And again, another thing for you to talk about in your one-on-ones, um, to get to know the other person as a human being. I actually like to, when someone new joins a team, I like to send them a document that I wrote that is basically my leadership style that helps introduce who I am, how I like to give feedback, when I'm available, what they should come to me about, how I'm going to try not to mess with their stuff. And again, trying to get to them to understand a bit more about my working style. The third tool I want to talk about is the Ladder of Leadership from David Marquet. It's a tool I discovered fairly recently, a few months ago, and I think it's a crime more people aren't using it. So this one is about addressing that problem of micromanaging. So one of the worries I have as a manager is, what is that balance between giving too much direction and being too prescriptive on one hand and being too hands off on the other? So instead of reading minds or trying to read my team's minds, this tool gives you a way to agree with your team member on how much involvement you're going to provide. So we have one aspect of it for the individual contributor, first for my team member. When they're new to a task, they'll probably want to engage in one of those lower levels of the ladder. Tell me how to do it is probably the most basic one. This is for a task that they've never done before. Or they want to say, I think I should do that. That's the level 3. But if as they get better at something and they get more experience, that's when they start engaging at a higher level of the ladder. And instead of asking for permission or direction, they say, I just did something. Let me tell you what I did. Or I've been doing something for a while. That's the top of the ladder. We aspire our team members to be operating on that level across the board. It's not realistic, but this is where we want to push people towards. The more confident and experienced your team members are, they'll want to naturally climb up that ladder because they will need less involvement and they would want to be more autonomous and own more. And as a manager, you really want to meet them where they are. So let's say they are operating at level 5, where they're very comfortable saying, hey, just so you know, I'm about to do this thing. But if you engage them at a lower level, they're going to see that as micromanaging, right? They're ready to just tell you what they're going to do. But instead, you're coming and you tell them, hey, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. That mismatch of levels, if you're engaging them at a lower level, you're going to be seen as micromanaging them. And if they're, let's say, at a level 3, and where they say, hey, I think I should do this, I'd love your advice, but you are engaging them at a much higher level, they're going to see that as, oh, my manager abandoned me. You're not going to be there for them for what they need. So introducing this ladder of leadership to your team and getting comfortable in saying, hey, for this task, where would you like me to meet you on the ladder of leadership? Once you align on that level of engagement, then you're going to give them the right amount of support and direction that they're comfortable with and they're looking for. And if you want to stretch them a bit and try to push them to develop to the next level, you can tell them, hey, I know you're comfortable at level 4, but for this task, I'm going to engage you at level 6, and I want to see how you do, because I want to push you a bit further. I know we mentioned books earlier. To be honest, I haven't read that many books on management. I think, me personally, I just learned a lot from doing and messing up and learning from that. But I would love to recommend 3 books that I found very, very helpful. They're quite short, but they help me a lot. The first one I mentioned already is The Making of a Manager by Julie Juo. It's incredible. It's a really great book about becoming a manager, being a first-time manager, whether you're joining a company, you're joining an existing team, you're building a team from scratch, or you're being promoted within your team to become that team's manager. The second book is The Effective Manager by Mike Horstman. It's, again, a very short book, and it focuses on 4 key aspects of what they see as the key aspects to being an effective manager. And that's one-on-ones, the feedback framework that I mentioned earlier, coaching, and delegating. And the last one, it's not exactly about management, but it's an amazingly effective book that's all about coaching your team. That's The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay-Stanier. It really teaches you how to go away from jumping into conversations into problem solving mode. Here, I'll tell you what to do. I'll give you advice, and instead learn how to ask the right questions and help coach your team through asking questions, not through prescribing a solution. So I just bombarded you with a ton of information and a lot of ideas to consider. I don't want to make things even more overwhelming, of course. So where should you start? Let's say you've just been promoted to a management position, or you're joining a new team or organization as a manager. What do you do? Well, a lot of it comes from our own training and experience as designers. First of all, meet everyone. Meet your team, managers, peers, and ask a lot of questions. Ask everything, how things are doing, what's working, what's not working. And more importantly, listen. Listen to what they're saying. Identify pain points. What's working, what's not working, mostly what's not working. Prioritize solutions that you see to those things, and act. So very, 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 very similar to a research and design exercise. I love the best 2 advices that I ever got to the end. The first one, I'm really, really good at setting very high expectations for myself and then get sad and upset when I don't meet them. And it's very easy to not meet my own high expectations for myself. So how do I avoid that feeling of falling short and disappointing myself and everyone else around me? I learned to celebrate my wins, and I learned to be okay with one win a day. It's something very powerful that one of my previous managers said to me. I just joined a new organization. Everyone was new. Everything was new. And I was overwhelmed. And they said to me, just look for one win a day. Like, as long as you can look, at the end of the day, look back and say, I did that thing. I wrote a document today, or I had a good conversation. As long as you find that one win a day, you're going to keep seeing that improvement. Baby steps. The other more important advice that I can give you is you don't have to do this alone. Learn to rely on others and not just do things alone like you did before, which usually is a way that a lot of us operated before we became managers. We were like experts in our area. We knew how to do everything. Took pride in doing it ourselves and owning our solution. Your team is there to support you. Find peers that you're comfortable venting to. I have a group of people at work that we just get together and vent, and it's so helpful. Ask for perspective from others. For example, find a mentor. This is one of the key benefits to having a mentor that can give you a perspective and a point of view that you won't get from within your organization. Talk to other first-time managers and share your frustrations and tips. Create your own venting circle. Learning how to get others' support and not try to do it just myself has been a lifesaver. And remember, you got this. The fact you're watching this session means that you care enough about being a good manager. So go and find your own unique path, and good luck.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for your presentation. I hope everyone got as much away from it as I did. We're going to go ahead and do some Q&A. Going to go ahead and show the first question. This question is, how does one know if being a
Mm.
people manager is right for them?
That is an amazing question. Thank you, Amy, for that. It's a tough question because it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. You have no, there's no easy way to experience that. There are some ways where you can sample what it likes being a people manager. So you can try and shadow your manager, or you can ask for, hey, can I have one or two direct reports to sort of train myself? Because one of the things that I've seen in organizations is that people go from being an individual contributor to, oh, okay, now you're a manager and you have 5 direct reports without any training. And that's going from 0 to 2,000 in 2 seconds. If you can try and talk to your manager and ask, what are some of the activities I could try to do and see if I can do well, or see if it even, if I enjoy doing it, that's a way to sample it. But the honest answer is it's really hard to figure this out. If the things I said earlier about, losing that direct control of the work, or not being in a state of flow, or those things that I said where you need to have a mind shift, if those don't scare you, you're probably okay. That's a
Awesome.
great answer. A great question. Sorry. Answer is
A great answer, too. Okay. Our next question is from Summer. It says, what advice might you have for a senior product designer who would like to move into design, leadership, and people management?
Yeah, thank you, Summer. That's a great question. So one is, like I just said to Amy, definitely try to find opportunities where you can try to sample the kind of work that a manager in your organization would do. Um, there is a really, really great, I don't know who said it first, but there's this saying that, you know, a manager is someone that has a title. A leader is someone that people follow. So it's really hard to try people management because that is more of an HR perspective where you have people that report to you and you're going to do, you know, performance reviews with them and those kind of things. But in terms of leadership, there's a lot of ways where you don't have to have a title to be a leader within a certain area, within a certain find initiatives and lead those. Define a strategy and try to get other people rallied around it. Um, all those things are things that are going to, again, help you. First of all, make a case for yourself why you're already operating in that level. So if you already have proof that, hey, look, I know I'm not a manager by title, but I'm already doing a lot of those activities that I would be asked to do as a manager. And I think being able to find those opportunities can really help you advance.
Awesome. So now I'm going to show our next question. How do you establish and maintain credibility with your team, especially when you're new to management?
Oh, that is tough. The best thing you can do is two things you can do. And both of them fall under that psychological safety. That's the most important thing and the first thing you want to establish for your team. I mean, it takes time. It's not a one-day thing. But you need to show that you care about them as a person and that you're not there to you're there to support them. And you do it through, again, setting defining a strategy or defining an outcome, a direction, not telling them how to do those things. um, the best times, or the times where, and again, I've worked with people who put on a very, very nice front, but then they would throw you under the bus as soon as you do something like that. you lose all credibility and all trust from your team. Finding those opportunities where you're presenting something and you credit your team, you don't credit for their work, or you protect them. You allow them to make mistakes, and you don't, and you not don't have to celebrate the mistakes, but you say, okay, and what have you learned from that? That's great. Showing them that it's okay to fail, it's okay to make mistakes, and that you care about them as people. That's the foundation that all that credibility is going to be based on. They care less about how well you know your craft. They care more about, am I going to get along with this manager? Because we know that, people said 70% of people say that the thing that impacts their mental health the most is their relationship with their boss. So that's a really good question.
Amazing.
Thank you, Anjani.
Okay. Our next question is, how do you measure if you're a good leader for your team?
That's a tough one. It goes back to that definition of what a manager is, or what a manager is responsible for. So you have the aspect of ensuring delivery of quality work, and you have the other aspect of developing your team. Um, there are different tools that help you measure kind of the engagement of your team. And a lot of it is where you see, things are not doing well. It's usually something that you can, doesn't necessarily mean it's your fault, but it's something that you have a direct impact on. So, for example, does your team know what is expected of them? Does your team feel like they are empowered to do the best job they can do? Does your team feel that there's someone who cares about them at work? If you see that your team is, and again, hopefully you set up some measurement of how you're going to measure success with your team. If they're doing well and they're engaged and they hit those quality goals, as in addition to you know, feeling the purpose and the autonomy and the mastery in their work, you're doing great. There are some things that are, I kind of like, they're symptoms that I notice. So, for example, if your team comes to you and opens up to you and tells you what's not working, that's usually a sign that you're doing well, because they trust you enough. Otherwise, you're going to hear rumors about it, and they not directly from them. And then you need sort of like, okay, what's happening here? How can I provide a better, more safe environment for them to come and talk to me? Thank you, Gabrielle.
Amazing. Our next question is, how do you overcome imposter syndrome? Maybe you can start with if you experience that and how maybe it applies to you.
Only every day. Um, a really good way to overcome, I wouldn't say overcome, because it's really hard to, I haven't managed to overcome it, but it's, how do you have imposter syndrome and continue to do a good job? I think it's sort of like, instead of like going against the fear, going with the fear, going with the imposter syndrome. A lot of times I've seen where people have that imposter syndrome is when it's a symptom of not having clear definition of what's expected of them. When I don't know what's expected of me, or how it's going to be measured, how will my own success will be measured, then I am not sure I'm hitting that. And naturally, for me at least, when I'm not sure about something, I will gravitate towards the negative reasons. And that's not good. If you know what your manager, for example, expects of you, if you have, let's say, OKRs or goals or KPIs or any sort of way to track and measure that not you said for yourself, but your manager, for example, said, okay, the success of your team is going to be measured by doing this, this, and this. If you're working towards that, you know objectively that you're on the right track and you're doing well. And you can also see that there's been improvement, which means you are doing your job. You are doing a good job because you are measuring through external, aspects, not just how we feel. You know that you're on the right track. So make sure you're aligned with your boss, and you're very, very clear on very specific on the expectations. It's not just I need to see good designs. Okay, what does it mean? That's very subjective, but I need to, we need to have improvement in customer sentiment by 10% this year. Go and do it. And you're going to do it and you're going to measure it. And if you're on the right track, you see it's improving, maybe 1% this month, 2% this one, but you know you're on the right track. So there's no point for imposter syndrome because you know objectively you're doing well. Thank you, Amanda.
Amazing. All right. Our next question, and we'll probably just do a few more questions if that's all right with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So this question is, what are some common challenges that first-time managers face, and how can they overcome them to successfully transition into their new role?
So it's really that aspect of, I covered a lot of that in this talk. It's that, I think for me, it was the lack of support or the lack of clear, again, going back to imposter syndrome and why it's very, very powerful for first-time managers. I think first-time managers get a lot of imposter syndrome because no one sets a good definition for them what it means for them to be successful. So they don't know if they're successful. And naturally we say, oh, I'm doing a terrible job. I'm going to be fired every day now. Talking to your manager, and again, that's the most important thing, because a lot of times, like I said, you're going to become a manager because it was time, right? Oh, you've done this long enough. You've done a really good job. You're ready to be a manager. Not the best reason for companies to promote people, because being a good doer doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good manager. Or again, being a good manager doesn't mean you're a good doer necessarily. But once they promote you, once you become a manager and you're giving this responsibility, they do a very bad job of describing what good looks in that. Because you know what good looks as a designer. You've been doing it for years. You don't really know what good looks as a manager. If you have a good manager, try to do what they're doing. In my case, I like to joke that one of the ways I learned how to be a good manager is by looking at all the past bad managers I had and doing the opposite. It's only half a joke. And I think once you identify in your specific organization what they see as a successful manager, it's going to help you create a sort of like a plan for how you start that. The book, The Making of a Manager, has really good tips on what to do as a first-time manager. But I think, like I said, start small. Start with, I need to understand what the vision for me is, and then you can operate within that.
Awesome. We have two more really strong questions.
Sure.
The second to last question is how to deal with staff who are being difficult and confrontational when they have vastly more experience than you.
So I would assume that the question that Matt is asking is about people who report to you on your team. I did not, or I hardly talked about having difficult conversations or managing difficult relationships in this talk, because that's like, 20 talks. It is one of the people problems is 99% of all the problems you're going to have at work. Every time you have a hard time, it's probably because some misalignment with another person. I think there's two things you can do here. One is that simple feedback framework. So if someone is being difficult and confrontational, what does it actually mean? What did they do? What is the observed behavior? Because being difficult and confrontational is your interpretation of something you saw. So they said something, or they, I don't know, maybe they rolled their eyes when you said something, but that's observed behavior. And you can tell them, hey, when you roll your eyes at me when I ask you to do something, the impact is I hate your guts. So don't do that. Or probably tone it down, obviously, don't say that. But you give them the feedback because they may not be aware of the impact, or a lot of times they're not aware of the impact of their behavior. So don't assume that they know that they have that negative impact on others. Once you provide that feedback, if you see there's no change in behavior, because sometimes people are, oh, I had no idea. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna do it again. That's fine. Hopefully that's what they're gonna do. But if you don't see a change, have a conversation with them. Try to understand, again, listen to them more than talk. Listen to as to why, like what's bugging them. Something is bothering them. Try to get to the bottom of this. Not from a point of you have to do this thing I told you, but how can I help you? Like, how can I help you do better? Is something that I'm saying or doing preventing you from doing your best work? I'm not letting any of them having more experience have any aspect of, like, it doesn't matter at all. I'm here not to tell you how to do your job. I'm here to provide a direction and a vision and relay what's coming from the top to you. I trust you to do the best job you can because you have more experience than I do. That's why you're here. But try to get to the bottom of what is blocking you and how can I help remove that block. I think we have time for one more.
Yep. All right. This is our last question. How do you balance learning with working with urgency when leading an early career team?
That's a really good one. I'll try to answer it in a couple of minutes. This is where that psychological safety come into place, because a lot of times, even if it's an early career team, people doers love to do. And if you encourage people to do and try things and iterate and show them that it's okay to mess up because they're going to learn something from it, and encourage an environment of trying things, they're going to see trying things as learning. So what you're doing is you're reframing them doing things iteratively quickly as them learning by doing. So you combine both of them. They don't have to learn and sort of until they feel comfortable enough to start working. Instead, you incorporate the learning into them actually doing things. So you get results, you get something tangible that you can work with and present and move forward. Plus, they're going to learn by doing things. Awesome. Just in time.
Just in time. Amazing. Thank you again for your session. It was fantastic. Everyone, enjoy Product Day. Go attend more sessions, and I'll see you later.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.